Okay, we're in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 10. Ecclesiastes, chapter 10. Dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savour. So doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honour. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. Yea, also, when he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth him, and he saith to every one that he is a fool. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offences. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, as an error which proceedeth from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low place. And we're picking up from verse 6. Folly is set in great dignity, which we've dealt with, and the rich sit in low place. Let's just read to verse 9. I have seen servants upon horses, and princes walking as servants upon the earth. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Whoso removeth stones shall be hurt therewith, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. So, verse 6, the latter part, and the rich sit in low place. The rich sit in low place. The reference is to the matters mentioned in Proverbs chapter 25. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 6 and 7. Put not forth thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men. For better it is that it be said unto thee, Come up hither, than that thou shouldest be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. And also James 2 verse 3. So in other words, wait to be asked to come up rather than putting yourself in a position where you have to be asked to come down. James 2 verse 3. James 2 verse 3, which says, And ye have respect to him that weareth the gay clothing, and say unto him, Sit thou here in a good place, and say to the poor, Stand thou there, or sit here under my footstool. And Luke 14, verse 8 to 10. When thou art bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honourable man than thou be bidden of him. And he that bade thee and him come and say to thee, And he that bade thee and him come and say to thee, Give this man place, and thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. But when thou art bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he that bade thee cometh, he may say unto thee, Friend, go up higher, then thou shalt have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. So again, humility, taking the lowest rather than the highest positions and the places. And a Christian, that should be second nature to us. We should not seek the best of everything, but wait to be called. You could take that rule throughout your life, even with promotion and everything. You've got to earn your place. Don't just expect things. That's the last thing you want to do, is expect things. So here before us in Ecclesiastes 10 verse 6, the rich sit in low place. So here before us in Ecclesiastes 10 verse 6, a fool hath taken over the throne. Verse 7. I have seen servants upon horses, and princes walking as servants upon the earth. A fool has taken over the throne. The princes have been reduced to the state of servants or slaves. The rich, in Ecclesiastes 10 verse 6, are wealthy princes, according to verse 7, who should be given the chief seats in the feast, but instead they are walking to the banquet, leading servants by holding the bridle of his horse. In 2 Samuel verse 15, 2 Samuel 15 verse 30, 2 Samuel 15 verse 30, we read about Absalom on horseback with David walking, which illustrates this matter perfectly. 2 Samuel 15 verse 30. And David went up by the ascent of Mount Olivet, and wept as he went up, and had his head covered, and he went barefoot, and all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they went up weeping as they went up. So 2 Samuel chapter 15, you'd need to read that. A truth of history is this, that inferior men like nothing better than to have superior men bow down to them. That's so true. Inferior men like nothing better than to have superior men bow down to them. It's all about pride, class, distinction. We've talked about discriminate, recognise a distinction. All men want to be honoured. Nebuchadnezzar was wroth with those who wouldn't bend or bow. What drives the Pharisees to murder, in Acts 5 verse 33, Acts 5 verse 33, when they heard that, they were cut to the heart and took counsel to slay them. And John 5:16, and therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. What drives the Pharisees to murder is the fact that neither Jesus nor his apostles will give them the honour and respect which they feel entitled to. The servant on horseback delights to see the prince on foot. Do you understand the comparison? Or in the last case, on a cross. Do you understand that? The servant on horseback delights to see the prince on foot, or in the last case, on a cross. They get a kick out of seeing Jesus Christ crucified. And people get a kick out of this sort of thing worldwide today. Some people just love the praise of men. The Lord sought not a reputation, but that's what people seek today. They just want a reputation. They want to be loved and praised of men. No interest in God, just men. John 12:42 and 43. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers also many believed on him, but because of the Pharisees they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. I see that among Christians today also, how sad it is to say that. People would rather compromise and do worldly things and live up to the world's expectations rather than God's. That disappoints me in a lot of areas in life. Galatians 1:10. Galatians 1 verse 10. For do I now persuade men or God, or do I seek to please men? For if I yet please men, I should not be the servant of Christ. Who are you pleasing? Whatever you get involved with, whatever you do, who are you pleasing? God or man? You're going to put your family first before God? You're going to put your partner before God? It shouldn't be the case. The servant wants the saddle. He wants honour. He wants to be acknowledged by the world and by his superiors. He wants praise. He wants admiration, or else. Are you like that? Do you want the praise of the world? The praise of man? The praise from your superiors? You'll suffer his wrath if you don't give it to him. Esther 3. I'm working with one hand tonight, so you'll have to bear with me. Esther 3. Verse. Where are we? Esther 3, 4 to 6. Esther 3, 4 to 6. Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. So he's wroth because he didn't get the praise, the reverence, the honour that he expected. And that happens a lot in Christian circles as well, especially people who see themselves as educated scholars. They expect to be held in high esteem, and we're just simple Bible believers, and we don't give them the honour that they expect or they think they deserve. And we give them no honour at all when they start to correct the Bible. So Bible correctors have no honour at all with us here. So Ecclesiastes 10, verse 6 and 7. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low place. I have seen servants upon horses, and princes walking as servants upon the earth. Verse 8. Just to say also regarding verse 8, neither of the following verses, from verse 8 onwards, are connected with verses 4 to 7 in the same chapter. So from verse 8 onwards, neither of the following verses are connected with verses 4 to 7. Verse 8, he that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Note the words hedge and stones. The verses deal with property lines and benchmarks. Let's look at a few verses, run a few references here. Job 6. Job chapter 6, verse 27. Yea, ye overwhelm the fatherless, and ye dig a pit for your friend. Psalm 7, verse 15. Psalm 7. Verse 15. He made a pit and digged it, and is fallen into the ditch which he made. So these verses are dealing with Ecclesiastes 10 verse 8 and 9. We're just running cross references with this, just to get the picture. Psalm 9 verse 15. Psalm 9 verse 15. The heathen are sunk down in the pit that they made, in the net which they hid is their own foot taken. Ecclesiastes 10:8 says, he that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Psalm 33. Psalm 33, verse 7. He gathereth the waters of the sea together as an heap. He layeth up the depth in storehouses. And 55 verse 23. 55 verse 23. But thou, O God, shalt bring them down into the pit of destruction. Bloody and deceitful men shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in thee. Psalm 57 verse 6. 57 verse 6. They have prepared a net for my steps. My soul is bowed down. They have digged a pit before me, into the midst whereof they are fallen themselves. And 94 verse 13. 94 verse 13. That thou mayest give him rest from the days of adversity, until the pit be digged for the wicked. And Proverbs 26 verse 27, the last one. Proverbs 26 27 verse 27. Whoso diggeth a pit shall fall therein, and he that rolleth a stone, it will return upon him. So these verses are related to these following verses. Just again to give us the picture. Those verses that we've quoted there are in relation to Deuteronomy 19. Deuteronomy 19 verse 14. Thou shalt not remove thy neighbour's landmark. We've said that the words hedge and stones, they deal with property lines and benchmarks. And so those verses we've just given you are in relation to these verses. Deuteronomy 19 verse 14. Thou shalt not remove thy neighbour's landmark, which they of old time have set in thine inheritance, which thou shalt inherit in the land that the Lord thy God giveth thee to possess it. Deuteronomy 27 verse 17. Deuteronomy 27 verse 17. Cursed be he that removeth his neighbour's landmark. And all the people shall say, Amen. And Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22 verse 28. Proverbs 22 verse 28. Remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. And the last one, 23:10. Proverbs 23 verse 10. Remove not the old landmark. So ancient landmark and old landmark. And enter not into the fields of the fatherless. So, going back, let's just recap a little bit. Ecclesiastes 10 verse 8. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Whoso removeth stones shall be hurt therewith, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. We've said to note the words hedge and stones. The verses deal with property lines and benchmarks. We gave a list of references that are related to other references in the scriptures. You reap what you sow. So when you violate a specific Old Testament commandment on property lines, you get what you have coming to you. You get what you have coming to you. Regarding lines, looking at, I watched a small, just a brief video on Israel yesterday or the day before. And again, reading the scriptures in the book of Deuteronomy, in my personal reading at the moment, and just reading about how Israel gets the land. It's been promised the land. It's an eternal covenant. So the Arabs and the Palestinians have no rights to the land because it's Israel's. God gave that land to Israel, and they're going to get the land. But nobody can see it. And the governments and all the people around the world leaders and that, and they're for the Arab and against the Jew. They're in for a hiding because God has given the land to Israel. So property lines, benchmarks, covenants, land, it's important in the Scriptures. And you will reap what you sow. So when you violate a specific Old Testament commandment on property lines, etc., you get what you have coming to you. Jeremiah 18. Verse 20. Shall evil be recompensed for good? For they have digged a pit for my soul. Remember that I stood before thee to speak good for them and to turn away thy wrath from them. The hedge in verse 8 and the stones in verse 9 are marks which outline the boundaries of a man's inheritance. The hedge and the stones, verse 8 and verse 9, Ecclesiastes 10, are marks which outline the boundaries of a man's inheritance. 1 Kings 21, verse 3. And Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. In regard to these verses in Ecclesiastes 10, here are a few warnings. Number 1, don't lay a trap or a snare for someone else, for you will fall into it yourself. Proverbs 1 verse 16 to 18. For their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird, and they lay wait for their own blood. They lurk privily for their own lives. Don't lay a trap or a snare for someone else, for you will fall into it yourself. It's a good rule of thumb for life. The Lord says, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Don't go setting traps and snares for people, wanting them to fall into it, trying to catch them out when you could so easily catch yourself out and do damage to yourself. Check your motives on everything. And why you do things, for what reasons. Are you trying to hurt somebody else? Christians do hurt other Christians. Number 2. So these are warnings in regard to the verses in Ecclesiastes 10. Number 2, don't tear down a hedge on someone else's property to enlarge your property. There is liable to be a serpent in the hedge. Again, you could keep pushing that and looking at that. Don't tear down a hedge or on someone else's property to enlarge your property. There is liable to be a serpent in the hedge. As human beings, we want the best always, it seems. We want the biggest, the fastest. And you'll tread on other people to get what you want. Human nature. You get addicted to materialistic things, a worldly, secular spirit. But you've got to be careful not to tear down someone else just to enlarge yourself, because there's liable to be a serpent in the hedge that you never accounted for. So be careful, be aware. There's a statement that says, fences make good neighbours. Fences make good neighbours. But now, today, in today's modern world, Civil rights are trying to destroy all boundaries between races, sexes, families, classes, property, income levels, so that everyone can trespass. I like that. That's so true. There were boundaries, there were fences set up to protect your property, but now civil rights worldwide, and the leaders of, I would say, most countries are trying to break down those boundaries so that there's no discriminating, no seeing or recognising a difference or a distinction. Now it's just breaking down everything, destroying all boundaries between races, sexes, families, classes, property, income levels, so that everyone can trespass. According to the media, the formula for peace on earth is to tear down all boundaries and fences and have one global village. The new world order. Hence why it was interesting when we had our discussion before we started our service this evening. So beware of that. Number 3. In the Bible, you are responsible for your own carelessness. You are responsible for your own carelessness. Today, in our modern, educated world, someone else is always responsible for your accidents, no matter how they came about. Everyone is suing everyone. It's a modern culture. You trip over the pavement, you sue the council. You hit a pothole in the road, you sue the people that did the tarmacking. You're suing everybody. But in the Bible, you are responsible for your own carelessness. And this has had a detrimental, which means causing harm, an effect. This has had a detrimental effect on society. As premiums on insurance have skyrocketed, prisons have never been so full. Criminals often have more rights than their victims these days. It's mad. And the fruits of this philosophy is incalculable. Incalculable. That's a tough one as well. We're on a downward spiral. The serpent of verse 8 is connected with the one in verse 11. If the trespasser fails to charm the snake before tearing down the hedge, the serpent is tearing down the hedge. The serpent is in the hedge and you can't see him until it's too late. So you've got to beware. You may do something and make a decision in your life that will affect somebody else. You may gain from their misfortune. But beware, there could be a serpent in the hedge. And you'll get bitten if you're not careful. The serpent of verse 8 is connected with the one in verse 11. If the trespasser fails to charm the snake before tearing down the hedge. You've got to count costs, folks, before you make decisions. Think about it. Will it benefit you? By you doing something, who's it going to benefit? Just you? Somebody else? Who's going to get hurt by your actions? How does the Lord feel about it? The serpent is in the hedge. You just can't see him until it's too late. Number 4. This is the last one. Number 4. Let's just go back to read Ecclesiastes 10 verse 8 and 9. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Whoso removeth stones shall be hurt therewith, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. You can't get hurt messing around with stones that stand for a benchmark on a piece of property. This is almost the same principle as verse 8. You can't get hurt messing around with stones that stand for a benchmark on a piece of property. That's a good principle. If something is there for a reason, for a demarcation line, it's there for a reason. As a rule of life, don't go messing around with things that you ought not to. It's almost the same principle as verse 8, dealing with the hedge. Cleaving wood, Psalm 141 verse 7. 141 verse 7. Our bones are scattered at the grave's mouth as when one cutteth and cleaveth wood upon the earth. Cleaving wood can be dangerous. 1 Kings 5. 1 Kings 5. Verse 15. 1 Kings 5 verse 15. And Solomon had 70,000 that bare burdens, the 80,000 hewers in the mountains. Hewers, that's an interesting word. Hewers. Hewers. Like lumberjacks or tree surgeons, as they're called today. Cutting wood can be a dangerous game. Many a time the axe will bounce back, or the head of it will fly off. 2 Kings 6 verse 5. 2 Kings 6 verse 5. But as one was felling a beam, a tree fellow, one was felling a beam, the axe head fell into the water, and he cried and said, Alas, master, for it was borrowed. We know what happened to that, because we had that as a DG homework years ago. You always remembered that. How it floated to the top. Remember that? So cutting wood can be dangerous. Many a time the axe will bounce back, or the head of it will fly off and even kill somebody. Deuteronomy 19 verse 5. 19 verse 5. As when a man goeth into the wood with his neighbour to hew wood, hew wood, and his hand fetcheth a stroke with the axe to cut down the tree, and the head slippeth from the helve, and lighteth upon his neighbour, that he die, he shall flee unto one of those cities and live. So cutting wood, if you've ever cut wood, and I've used an axe, my dad's axe when I was younger, and you've seen these films of the lumberjacks and the woodcutters, and you take the axe in both hands, and you swing it hard and fast, and you hit the tree, and it could be sodden with water, or it's not dry, and that bounces back and hits your shin, and it hurts. I've done that before. It hurts, and it cuts bad, and that's the back of the axe. So cutting wood can be a dangerous thing. Hence why in verse 9, look, Ecclesiastes 10 verse 9, Whoso remove the stone shall be hurt therewith, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. It's a dangerous game, cutting wood. And again, cutting wood using an axe where the head comes loose. You go up, have a little handheld chopper, a small one, and you strike the wood. You go to do the wood once, twice you're cutting the wood, and then on the third time you're coming up, you get into a rhythm, and the third time their head flies off. And because of the momentum, it flies quite a distance, and you can do some damage with that Somebody got killed in Deuteronomy 19. Had to flee for mercy into one of those cities and be sheltered. So endangered thereby. In the context, the reference would be to cutting down a line of trees that mark a boundary, or else cutting down a wooden fence that surroundeth someone's property. Talking to a businessman one day up in the Wirral, and he's a self-made millionaire. He's a builder by trade, and I remember sitting in his office and we were chatting about another company, and he says, one day I'm going to buy that company. It's his competitor, he's going to buy that company out. And people always want to grow, and they want to take things over, and they want to expand at the expense of somebody else, even if it means putting them out of business. You know, everybody's got mortgages to pay and that, but they're not bothered. I remember years ago hearing a sermon about how the greed of man, you know, you earn a living, you've got competitors, and you say have 40% of the market share. Well, if you run your business efficiently, you know, and you've got the 40% of the market share, and everybody's earning a good living there, shouldn't be be content with what you have? But no, they want to destroy then their competitor, who also perhaps has another 40% of the market share. So they want to destroy their competitor and put them out of business because they want more. And it's just greed. And I've been in companies and worked for owners of companies that have started small and got bigger and bigger and brought in more money, but the profit hasn't been particularly good. But if they'd have stayed where they were and just become efficient, they would have been profitable, and everybody could have earned a good living out of it. But no, they want more. They say turnover is for vanity, but profit is for sanity. And that's so true. And some people just like the vanity, which is, again, good for these verses that we've looked at tonight. People just want the turnover. They want to be somebody. They want to destroy their neighbour. They want to destroy their competitors. Just because of vanity. Man's mad. Never content. Never happy. So these verses, even though they're a bit perhaps off the wall a little bit, you know, they don't perhaps have a lot of continuity between them. It's more like Proverbs, isn't it, with these? But of course, it's Solomon who's writing. You can still take so much from them. What we have done is just given a brief overview of these verses, but you could certainly take those principles and apply them to your own lives, thinking about it. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low place. Even those verses we looked at right at the start, sitting in low place. Always wanting the best out of life. Well, how about letting somebody else have the best? You take second best for a change. I've seen servants upon horses, princes walking as servants upon the earth. There's good and bad decision makers. Good and bad decision maker in business can destroy or make a company. One bad decision can destroy a company. Banks have gone under because one person has made some bad decisions, cost them billions. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Whoso removeth stones shall be hurt therewith, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. There's some good principles of life in those verses. We shall pick up again from verse 10 next week. Let's pray.